Welcome to this edition of Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm Candide Villard, League Administrator, and your host for today's program to better understand ballot initiatives. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse political candidates or parties. The League does, however, take positions on issues. Our purpose is to empower voters and defend democracy. Go Vote Omaha primarily focuses on policy issues, and as a result of our discussions, we hope you will feel ready to make informed decisions at election time. I'm joined by Sandy Griffin. She is the Advocacy Campaign Manager at the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table. The Table is a nonprofit organization that works with nonprofits to increase voting and to build an engaged Nebraska. Today we will discuss the ballot initiative process in Nebraska, learn more about the history, and what's going on now. Thank you for being here, Sandy. Let's start with the basics. What are ballot initiatives?
So the basics of ballot initiatives are there issues that are directly put on the ballot for you to vote on in Nebraska. So it could be a variety of different issues. In Nebraska, we've seen the death penalty on the ballot, Medicaid expansion, and this year we're going to be seeing a lot of different ballot initiatives out there collecting signatures and aiming to get on the ballot for 2022. So it's a great opportunity to participate in some really cool direct democracy and really directly make your voice heard.
Awesome. So why would you say that we need ballot initiatives?
I think people need to be able to make their voices heard beyond just voting for candidates, right? Beyond just electing representatives. Being able to make your voice heard directly on an issue that impacts your everyday life is something that can be incredibly powerful, especially when you're thinking about, okay, well, I don't really necessarily feel super enthused about these different candidates. Maybe I don't feel like these things represent me. Maybe I don't see the importance of voting for me. But I think ballot initiatives are something that cuts through all of that and really asks people, okay, what do you care about? How will these things impact you, and how does policy impact your everyday life? And being able to vote directly on that, I think just gives Nebraskans and gives people who can vote on ballot initiatives just a really cool opportunity to really speak up and make their voices heard.
Awesome. So how would you say ballot initiatives get placed onto the ballot?
So usually they're placed on the ballot by a signature drive. So when you see people out there collecting signatures, when you see people out there they have a petition, they're like, hey, are you a registered voter in Nebraska? In order to get on the ballot, people need to meet certain signature requirements, both statewide or county by county. So a lot of these ballot initiatives do have distribution requirements, so you can't just run up numbers in two places. You have to qualify at least 38 of our 93 counties with at least 5% of the vote, as well as having different statewide requirements based on what type of ballot initiative it is.
Cool. So how are the topics for ballot initiatives determined?
Well, the really cool thing about these topics is they can be determined by the people, right? If there's enough energy and drive and passion and organization behind an issue, it can get on the ballot. It can really have an opportunity to be submitted for a petition drive. And then from there, once that language is submitted to the Secretary of State, people can go out directly into their communities and try to get the petition or try to get the signatures in order to get that issue on the ballot.
Awesome. So could you tell us about some of the ballot initiatives going on here in Nebraska now?
Yeah, so it's a really exciting time because there are a lot of different ballot initiatives that are up for discussion, that are collecting signatures, that really have a cool opportunity to get on the ballot in 2022. There's a ballot initiative to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2026. Which is super exciting. There's also a medical marijuana ballot initiative out there collecting signatures. And probably my least favorite is the voter ID, or the voter restriction amendment petition that we're seeing circulate too, that's trying to get on the ballot.
Awesome. So could you tell us about the differences between the different types of ballot initiatives?
Yeah, so there are different types of ballot initiatives based on what type of law you're trying to put into place. There's constitutional amendments, which would directly amend the Constitution, and that has an opportunity to get petitions, to get signatures collected from the people. You need at least 10% of registered voters in Nebraska in addition to that distribution requirement in order to get that on the ballot. It can also be brought up by our unicameral. So if 60% of senators want a constitutional amendment to go on the ballot, that's a way that it can get on the ballot. And there's also a initiated state statute that requires about 7% of registered voters, but it's basically just putting another law on the books. And there's also veto referendums. So that There are two different options that take place there depending on the amount of signatures that you get and depending on what you want to do. So if you have a veto referendum, you want to get rid of a law, for 5%, you can put that issue on the ballot and see if that can get vetoed that way. And for 10%, you can suspend that law temporarily until people have a chance to say, yes, I want that, or no, I don't.
Okay, and so could you tell us about why a ballot initiative might be used rather than legislation?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say if something, just doesn't have what it takes or doesn't have the support in the legislature to really pass and to really have an opportunity to become law, that's an issue that Nebraskans can take into their own hands. So if you're frustrated, if you're like, okay, I know the unicameral will pass this in 100 years, but there's huge, broad-based popular support, then people can take that into their own hands and they don't have to wait for the legislature to make that decision for them and to put that in action.
Okay, cool. And so how would you say that ballot initiatives become law?
Yeah, so you vote on it. That's basically the gist of it. It's a simple majority. First, you have to meet those petition requirements, and you have to do that by that July before that November election. So you have to meet those signature requirements, have to meet those distribution requirements. But once those are met, it goes off to the Secretary of State to get the language drafted that'll go on the ballot. And then you have it on the ballot to vote for or against or to repeal or retain in the case of a veto referendum. But you have that opportunity there to decide whether or not it becomes law.
Awesome. And I don't know if you've already mentioned this, but how many signatures does a ballot initiative need in order to get on the ballot?
So like I mentioned before, it'll vary based on the type it is. So something like the minimum wage initiative, that needs 7%, that initiated state statute. Right. So I think 7% right now is probably around 88,000 of Nebraskans, just that percentage of registered voters. A constitutional amendment requires 10%. A veto referendum requires 5% or 10% to temporarily I was about to say turn off that law, but basically something to that effect, to temporarily suspend that law until voters have a chance to make their voice heard.
Gotcha. And so what happens if the ballot initiatives don't get the ballot?
They kind of fizzle out, but there's an opportunity in the future. You're not barred from bringing up ballot initiatives again. I know medical marijuana is something that's come up again and again through our ballot initiative process in various forms. You have another opportunity, so say 2 years from now, that ballot, you could try again and see if you can get the support you need to get on the ballot next time.
Okay, and so what happens if two conflicting ballot initiatives are both on the ballot at the same time?
Whichever one that gets the most votes wins. So you need at least 35% of the people voting to vote on either ballot initiative in order for it to pass. But whatever simple majority wins. So if one ballot initiative gets 40% of the vote and the other ballot initiative gets 45, it's the 45 that's gonna win.
Okay, and what types of ballot initiatives have we already passed here in Nebraska? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've passed a lot of different ballot initiatives in Nebraska, and I think there's just a ton of interest and enthusiasm around ballot initiatives in Nebraska, which makes me super excited. We passed Medicaid expansion, which really made it possible for a lot more Nebraskans to obtain health care. We passed a payday lending cap, which made it a lot harder for payday lending companies to take advantage of people and put interest rates at really high rates that really took advantage of people trying to get loans, trying to get finances settled. But even the founding of our unicameral was determined by ballot initiative. The fact that we have one house, unlike any of the other states, that was determined by the ballot initiative process.
So that leads to my next question. Do other states use ballot initiatives as well?
Yeah, there are about 25 other states, not all 50, which was surprising to me when I learned it. Definitely. Growing up in Nebraska, you're really used to ballot initiatives. It's like, why is this not everywhere? Because it's such an awesome way for people to participate. But about 25 other states have it in some form, whether it be allowing constitutional amendments or veto referendums or that state statute.
Okay, thank you for that. So could you tell us about how the language is determined for ballot initiatives?
Yeah, so when the petition is initially submitted, whoever that sponsor is, whatever organization or person or whomever is bringing that up to the Secretary of State will submit a draft. And then from there, the Secretary of State might have some notes, might have some edits, might have some suggestions, and it sort of goes back and forth until you get to the petition language. And then once the petition gets enough signatures, the Secretary of State ultimately decides what language is put on the ballot.
Gotcha. Okay. And so how are we affected by what gets passed?
You're affected in a lot of different ways. As I mentioned before, Medicaid expansion, that's something that really opened a lot of opportunities for people to get health care access. The payday lending cap, another great example. Minimum wage, a minimum wage increase was passed in 2014, and there's another opportunity to do it again and try to get Nebraskans closer to a living wage this year, which I think is really, really incredible. But I would also say I love ballot initiatives, but not every policy, not every ballot initiative would have positive impacts, right? So when we talk about voter restriction amendments, that would make it harder for a lot of people to vote, especially thinking about people who might not have access to identification or might not be driving or might live in a county in Nebraska whose DMV is open less than once a month. Having those barriers or having these opportunities in place or something like, laws impact your everyday life, and what are ballot initiatives but laws that are directly determined by people. So there's a lot of different ways it can go. It can be positive, it can be negative, but either way, it's something that can really directly impact you.
Awesome. And so what can people do who want to get involved with ballot initiative work?
So much, and this is a question that gets me super excited because this is what ballot initiatives are all about, right? Citizen participation. It can go beyond just voting yes or no on the ballot, which is something you can absolutely do, vote for or against. But if you're interested, say, if you're really enthusiastic about raising the minimum wage, if you're really interested in getting more involved on any ballot initiative issue, you could circulate petitions. That could be, circulating among hotspots or at community events or wherever to collect signatures, or that could just be talking to your friends and family and saying, hey, I really care about this issue. I think this issue would impact my everyday life, and having an opportunity to speak directly with your neighbors, your community, to have a chance to get them more involved and to have a chance to get them interested in the issues that you care about. So petition circulation is always a huge one. Talking to your friends and family about issues that you care about, issues that are going on the ballot, and just doing your research and trying to educate yourself, regardless of whatever the issue is. So okay, I think this is something that would really impact me positively, this would be really great for my community, or I feel like this would be challenging for my community. And I also think you have a ton of opportunities just being a person walking down the street, right? Regardless of where you are, chances are if you live in Nebraska, you've probably run into someone with a clipboard asking you to sign a petition. And sometimes you turn around and go the other way. Yeah. Sometimes you sort of want to avoid anyone asking you questions, but I think that's missing a huge opportunity, right? I think it's missing an opportunity to engage because there's a ton of different ballot initiatives on the ballot. And sometimes you don't know just by looking at a petition what it's going to be. But by taking the time to listen and be like, okay, yeah, what are you trying to collect petitions for? What is this policy? What's happening here? Right. And then from there you can decide, okay, yeah, this is something I want to sign, or, oh, that's something I really want to research more, look into more, or absolutely not, I don't want to sign because I don't think it would be beneficial for me or my community. And whatever your answer is, the person who's circulating the petition isn't going to get mad at you for saying no. They're not going to put a curse on your family for saying no in a baker's parking lot. But I think just even taking the 5 seconds it takes to be okay, yeah, I want to hear what you want to say. Yeah. Can be it's just a great example of participation.
Great, and I know a lot of people can relate to seeing someone with a clipboard asking for signatures, and so could you kind of tell us about what happens after the step of signing the petition or after the person gets the required signatures that they needed? What's that direct next thing that happens?
Yeah, so the next thing that happens after that is it gets submitted to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary combs through all of these different signatures. As I mentioned before, for a state statute, that's 88,000 signatures. It's a lot of signatures. Actually, compared to some state, that's a low bar and a low requirement with larger populations. Some states are wow, Nebraska only has 88,000. I'm so jealous. Right. But they comb through all of those different signatures, and they make sure that they're valid. So they check them against the voter registration records. They check their signature. They just It's also really important to make sure that whenever you're signing a petition, to do it really legibly, so that way you can really make sure that that petition is being counted, that your signature is being counted towards that. But a lot of those signatures end up getting thrown out. So of course, if you're running a ballot initiative, you always want to make sure you have a lot of padding, because if you put down, say you're registered to vote at a different address, say you signed the wrong county sheet, you live in Sarpy County, but you signed a petition for Douglas County, anything like that could mean that your petition signature isn't counted.
Wow, okay. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this kind of work?
Yeah, so I initially started in my position with the table specifically as a field manager, and I really was passionate about get out the vote work and a lot of these different civic engagement pieces. I started in college at UNO, majoring in political science, but having absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with it. I was just like, I'm gonna cross my fingers, hope this works out, against everyone's better judgment, but luckily for me, it really did work out. And you know, being able to work in Omaha, being able to work in Nebraska, where I feel like the work that you do matters so much more, because I feel like this type of engagement can go so much further, especially when we have a ballot initiative process, especially when we have a unicameral. All of the actions that you take, I feel like can be so magnified and can be so impactful. And ballot initiative work specifically is just so cool to me. And one of the reasons I was super excited about this position as an advocacy campaign manager, because it was really an opportunity to get my hands more into that kind of work. And I mean, direct democracy is amazing and wonderful, and there's not a lot of things to hate about it.
Right.
And there's not, you know, I feel like with a lot of the political stuff, when you talk to people, sometimes when you talk about candidates, sometimes when you talk about political parties, a lot of those discussions can get really inflamed, especially in like today's political climate.
Yes.
It's really hard to talk to people about a lot of different things. But I find like when you get down to the issues, when you get down to saying, hey, like, do you think that people should make higher wages? Hey, do you think that, you know, more people should have access to health care? How do you feel about this specific issue that like really affects your life that you can look at and feel empathy for, or you can look at and see how that would impact your neighbor or your daughter or your friend or your sister or whomever? Like those conversations can be so much more productive, and they can be kind of a salve for a lot of the bitterness of a lot of our political rhetoric outside of it.
Definitely. And I know you said that there's quite a few ballot initiatives going on in Nebraska right now, but is there like one special one to you that you're specifically advocating for right now?
So I'm going to let Raise the Wage talk later about some of their initiatives, but a lot of my work this year is revolving around raising the minimum wage, which is super exciting and I think a really cool opportunity for Nebraskans. It's something that other states have done successfully, and I think especially in light of the pandemic, especially the past year and a half, however long it's been, you know, we have so many essential workers. We have so many people who have been working so hard to make sure that there's food on our shelves, that make sure that we have access to all of these different things that have just been keeping everything running in order for us to live our lives. Like the very least that they deserve is something approaching a living wage.
Yes.
The very least that they deserve is something that makes it possible to put food on the table for their families, that makes it easier. Just makes their lives a lot easier and less challenging, because our current wages are not enough to live on for anybody. And especially when you talk about having a family, especially when you talk about juggling a lot of different things. There's this misconception that everyone who works minimum wage is a teenager, right? And that's not true. A lot of people working minimum wage in Nebraska are above the age of 20. The majority are. So it's really important that everyone, especially people who have been doing such essential work throughout this really awful time, get access to the wages that they deserve. And this is just a starting point.
So do you think that amidst what's going on in the world right now, there's been a difficulty for people to get signatures? I know that there's a lack of public spaces that maybe aren't necessarily being filled as they used to and things of that nature. Do you have any background of what effects that's had so far?
Yeah, it's been really hard, especially leading up to 2020. I think in 2020 we're going to have more ballot initiatives at stake. We were going to have more petition collection efforts that we were aware of, but because of the pandemic, because of everything shutting down, it no longer really felt feasible and responsible to do so. And I think we're really lucky to have vaccines available and to have, everything's still weird. It's not ideal. But at least it makes it possible to go out and do outdoor events, to go in your community, to talk to friends and family and feel really safe and comfortable about doing some form of petition collection. And the really nice thing too is it can vary based on your comfort level. So say you're interested in collecting signatures or something like that for whichever issue, and you're like, okay, but the thought of going into a crowd of 500 people makes me nauseous, so I don't want that. It's totally fine for you to, some of the most valuable conversations and relationships that you can have while doing any sort of petition collection work or doing any sort of advocacy can be directly in your community with friends, family, neighbors. So if you're interested in getting involved and you're just sort of overwhelmed by the idea of doing this large-scale petition collection, there's a lot of things that you can do to still help that effort and to build those deeper relationships and deeper discussions. While still staying within your bubble.
Okay, cool. And so how could people get connected with the table to learn more about how to get involved in those kinds of things?
Yeah, I would love to plug our social media. So we are on Facebook, Instagram. I believe we have a Twitter account, but we're not as active there. But definitely follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We definitely post a lot of the different work that we're doing, and we really want to uplift the work that our members are doing. We have over 70 different member organizations that have been doing such critical work throughout this entire time period, not just when we talk about ballot initiatives or voter registration or GO2B, but just in throughout this pandemic, meeting the needs of their communities and trying to really bridge a lot of gaps. So I would say follow us on social media.
Yes.
We have a mailing list, we have a website, we have all of that other good stuff.
Okay, cool. I do want to give you this opportunity to give us any kind of wrap-up you might have about ballot initiatives, why people should really care about it, anything that you have last thoughts on.
Yeah, I think if I had any takeaway that I wanted people to get from this, it's if you see someone with a clipboard, be kind to them, talk to them, take that opportunity to engage, really take that opportunity to listen. You can still say no. There are definitely some ballot initiatives that I would say no to. But take that opportunity to learn more about this process, because I think when you really distill it down, this is just such a great opportunity to make your voice heard directly on an issue that you care about. Whatever that issue is, it's a really, really cool example of direct democracy, which I wish we could see more of, because I think that's the epitome of civic engagement, right? Is when people can make their voices heard directly on an issue, not even through a candidate, not through a party, but through the issue itself. And really directly impact people's lives and change people's lives, which I think is just why I'm in this work in the first place and why this is so exciting.
Definitely. And I guess a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
So when someone approaches someone with a clipboard, what would you say is a key indicator that that's an official ballot initiative for someone who's maybe weary of things or people coming up to them and talking to them?
Probably depends on the question they're asking, right? One of the questions that always get asked, so in order to be able to sign a petition, you have to be a registered voter. So if someone's asking you hey, are you a registered voter in Nebraska? It's probably because either they're trying to register you to vote, which you should also do, amazing to do,
Yes.
And also, or that they're trying to collect petition signatures. Another big giveaway is the petitions that are circulated are huge. They are unruly and large. Yeah. So you might just notice by the sheer size of the clipboard that they're carrying. It's this big. So if they ever have an absolute honker of a clipboard, it's probably a ballot initiative. And so whatever question they're asking, whether it's about medical marijuana or the voter restriction or raise the wage, those are a lot of the issues that we're seeing. So about any of those issues. I also want to highlight that there is a separate there can also be local ballot initiatives, which I won't get super into because it's not my expertise. But I do know that in Omaha, they are also trying to raise the tip minimum wage. So there's also a petition for that. So if you see that, that's another really cool opportunity.
Great. I guess something else that I would love to ask you is there's also amidst this time, we've seen a lot of online petitions. What would you say is the major difference between someone collecting petitions online and how that gets put into action versus our ballot initiatives?
Yeah, so unfortunately our Nebraska political process doesn't allow for online petitions. They
Right.
have to be physical, and they have to go through sort of this rigorous process, right? So it has to all be handwritten, it has to be certified by a notary, and then after that all of those petitions are certified based on their signature, based on their voter registration. So that's your only real chance in Nebraska to get something on the ballot. Something you sign online in Nebraska is not going to push something to the ballot.
Right.
That's not to say that all online petitions are bad or not helpful. I think they can definitely be a way, like, to pressure public officials to make your voice heard, to communicate something, to get more involved on a certain issue that you care about, and maybe do that kind of base building and relationship making that makes future ballot initiatives or other kinds of direct advocacy possible. But in order to get something on the ballot, it's got to be a physical.
Awesome. Well, I am so happy to have you here. Thank you again for speaking with us and for joining this program, Sandy. For the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm Candide Villard, reminding you to inform yourself about issues and candidates, and at election time, be ready to go vote Omaha.